Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Sharing Hope. My name is Barry Sneed, and I'm your host today. It brings me a lot of pleasure to be able to introduce two of my very good friends, Dr. J. Strack and Dr. Brent Crowe. Dr. J is the president and founder of Student Leadership University, and Dr. Brent Crowe is the vice president of Student Leadership University. These guys have impacted my life in many ways of how they have poured into the lives of students over the years. And Student Leadership University is the only really ministry and events that I know out there that is doing anything like what these guys are doing. So I'm really inspired to share these guys with you today. Dr. J and Dr. Brent have authored 30 books together. It was pointed out to me earlier that Dr. J has authored 25 of those books and Brent has authored 5 of those books. These guys work hand in glove together. One of the amazing things that I go to many times in studying is the Student Leadership Impact Bible, in which Jay is the editor and Brent is the assistant editor. And so I welcome them to the broadcast today. And Dr. J, it's great to see you.
Well, thank you, Barry. I'm pumped to be here. I'm glad to be anywhere with this circumstance we all find ourselves in. But I'm grateful for this technology that allows us to talk to so many, and very excited and pumped to be on Sharing Hope. Heard about that when it was a dream, and now it's a reality. And so what a ministry. And so I'm very grateful to see CM, very grateful to Medi-Share, but most of all to find out not only how they help come up with healthcare emergencies and a way to share that and make a huge difference in our lives, but then to find out the tremendous concern they have for the family, for churches, for Christian schools, and for students. So I'm pumped to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks, Barry. I'm very excited to be here as well. I'm Dr. J's chief intern. I've served in that role for nearly 18 years, which means I just do whatever he tells me to do. And then when I deserve a little bit of some love, he'll throw some my way, just a little bit. So I'm just here today is really an intern role. You can't see it down here, but I'm actually carrying all his papers and his phone and his to-do list, and I've got a special water for him right after we're done. But I've had the privilege of serving at this organization for I think about 18 years now, and we love the fact that we're partnering with an organization in Medi-Share and Christian Care Ministries to do more together than we ever could on our own. And so what we've seen is that this is an incredible, not just ministry and organization, but an incredible thought leader in collaboration so that we all can expand our capacity. And this new initiative called Sharing Hope during this crazy time of COVID-19 is just one more example of that. And so it's an honor to be here with you, buddy, and excited about our conversation today.
Well, we've had a lot of togetherness, and it's good to be together with you guys today. Every time I think about SLU, it always brings me back to the mission statement of how you guys are developing and equipping students to think, to dream, and to lead. And I really want to kind of focus on the dream aspect of that today and throw the ball to you and let you guys talk about that. How do you present that and help students create margin for just that, to be able to think and dream in order that they can be better leaders for the future, not just for the future, but now and for the future?
Well, Barry, first of all, I don't like to begin on my time by quoting Brent, but Brent has a great phrase and a great description talking about the journey, where he talks about that every student is going to have a story written. Why don't they write their own story, and why don't they change the narrative? And what that does immediately is it allows students to realize that if it's to be, whatever that means, if it's to be, it's really up to me. and we can't go by circumstances, and we can't go by maybe, perhaps, or man, if something happens to break my way, that we really do have a say in our life and in the direction of our life. So I love Brent's way. It's a much more sophisticated way. I usually begin by saying there's got to be a time the little boy sits down and the man stands up. Got to be a time the little girl sits down, the woman stands up. Brent comes along and makes them feel good about that. So he's been a great addition. And I don't think that word chief intern means what he thinks it means. So we'll get into that on another broadcast. But you know, I never will forget the day when we were all, and you know, we all know what it's like. Every businessman, every teacher, every school leader, every youth pastor, all of it, and business women, we all know that, you know, occasionally you have to really look at how people see you. And one day we were with some very talented people, and they just said, looking at everything we were doing, well, man, what you guys do is, man, you're helping a generation learn to think and dream and lead. Now, we were working real hard trying to help students learn how to be leaders. And when they spilled it out like that, to see other people saying in their impression about what we were doing, it was very motivating for me. And I think, obviously, we kind of liked the phrase, how to think, how to dream, how to lead. And what an opportunity to talk about when we're all together. And we have this opportunity to really think about how we're modeling for our children. And are we using this as a mentor opportunity? And as one father said to me, who has 3 teenage boys, he said, you know, man, I've been looking at how exhausting this is and complaining about all this. And then he said, you know what? I may not ever have this kind of quality time with my children that I have right now. And, you know, I thought, what a great insight. And so, especially when it comes to your dream. And that's what we love to do. And part of what we do is not only how to think and, you know, how not to follow the crowd. And one of Brent's books called Chasing Elephants. So it's kind of a grid for decision making. But we're trying to help students really be convinced in their own mind that Jesus is real. It's cool to be a leader. It's cool to be a good student. It's cool to be a devoted, passionate follower of the Lord. It's cool to stand up to a bully. You know, it's cool to help others. And so we get a great opportunity, but especially how to help them just imagine if, and really sit down and ask them, what would you do if you could do anything for the glory of God? And what would you could do if you knew no one would laugh at you or put you down? So this is a great time, and I know Brent will elaborate on it, but this is a great time for families and those of us that still have students, where, you know, our Christian schools and youth pastors and pastors, and when you have a time to minister. But one thing we got to do in this lockdown, quarantine, whatever you want to call it, is put a sweet taste in the mouth of our children, and then for the things of God, and give them permission to have a dream. And get them to think about it and flesh it out.
I love that. And I love the fact that you use the word modeling. And we see that all through Scripture. We see that in the life of Jesus and so many other heroes of the faith in the Bible. Brent, throw it to you.
Yeah, well, I thank you, Barry. And we have kind of followed that paradigm, that grid, helping a generation think, dream, and lead at the feet of Jesus. And I think we'd all be lying if we didn't say, and when I say all of us, I mean our faculty and everybody that teaches at all our programs, that the dream part is one of the most enjoyable things to teach. And one of the ways that I think is really important that in how we present this idea of what is your dream, what would you do for the glory of God if you knew you wouldn't fail, is that we couch it into the grand narrative of Scripture, and we primarily couch the idea of the gift of imagination and creativity in the creation narrative, which is to say that really first plot movement in Scripture. If the Bible is a story that has 4 plot movements, creation, fall, redemption, and restoration, then the idea of creativity and imagination is actually discovered for us in that first plot movement, the creation narrative. And so within that plot movement, we see that there's really 3 gifts that are given to humanity. And We see the gift of relationship. Adam and Eve were given to each other in marriage. We see the gift of freedom. God said you can go anywhere, just don't go over there and eat that. And that idea, by the way, of freedom had embedded into that definition the idea of responsibility. So a key ingredient in defining freedom is responsibility. And those two gifts are oftentimes seen, recognized, preached on, taught on. But a gift that's often overlooked in the creation narrative is the gift of creativity and imagination. We see it in Genesis 2:18 and 19 when the Lord God made all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air, and he brought them to Adam. And then the Bible says to see what he would call them. Now, we either got to believe that God didn't know what Adam would call them. That's stupid. I mean, God sees everything, and he knows yesterday better than we know. I mean, he knows tomorrow better than we know the back of our hand. And so God knew what Adam was going to name the animals, but yet God wanted Adam to do something. He wanted him to use this sense of creative energy within the context of his creation to fulfill God's desired will. And so the last thing I really would say about a dream is not designed to make you feel better, first and foremost. It's not designed to be a fantasy. That's oftentimes the idea. My dream is this fantastical thing that, a dream at the end of the day is answering the question, what would it look like if the desired will of God was met in this aspect of a broken world and culture? And so we're really trying the best we can, and with the audience that the Lord gives us, now over 200,000 students, to just try to ask them to think through, okay, the world is broken. God has some desires for this world. What would it look like if those desires were met? And oh, by the way, he in advance gave you the gift of creativity so that you could answer that question. And so I love the dream part. I think all of us, like I said, selfishly feel like that's maybe one of our favorite things to teach when we're talking to our students about the future.
That's awesome. One of the things, and I've experienced it firsthand, is the environment that you guys create for the students, but also you create opportunity for youth pastors and leaders that are out there in the trenches every day, that are trying to reach students, that are ministering to them, loving on them, in many instances being a parent to them because they don't have much connection to their parents. And so I want to throw this question out there to you, because now you've been doing this, as I said earlier, for about 25 years. And so, Jay,
well, I would. Let's be honest. I'm the intern. So Dr. Jay's been doing it for.
I forgot.
I've just been.
He's going to find out what being an intern's really all about.
Which by the way, Brent, what color M&Ms does Jay like?
I have no comment.
Okay. All right.
Let me answer that for anybody in case I come be with them. I love all kinds of M&Ms.
Okay.
No matter what flavor, what color, just bring it on, baby. All right.
Jay, speak to when the seed was planted, when you felt like God was calling you to do this, because obviously, and that's why I wanted to start with dreaming, because you obviously thought a lot about this, prayed a lot about this. You imagined something for students and student leaders, and God has given you the opportunity, the giftedness, the resources to do this for as long as you have. And I'd really love for Brent to talk about, what the future looks like down the road, and what God has taught you guys through that. So, Jay, share with our audience.
Well, thank you, man. What a great question. First of all, it's fun to dream about things and the future. I've learned that if I can pull something off by myself, it's probably not of God. It's a small dream. It's a man-made dream. It's just a wish or something my ego came up with. Yeah. Because if you can pull off something by yourself, then I think we're pretty sure the Lord may not be the center of that, if he even has anything to do with that. So I learned early on, when I had this dream and I did my best to be obedient to the heavenly vision, I knew that I couldn't do it by myself. And it started out, my wife, Diane, sitting at a table, and I'm going, man, I just got this crazy idea. I wish, wouldn't it be cool if we could show students how exciting it is to get in on God's plan, to get in. Everybody would see me, some of my old friends, and you got to always share part of your journey. And so you can help others go on this journey. And I think parents need to do that the best we can with good wisdom and discretion, but about maybe how we started our journey. And for me, I dug a hole with my own hands. And I'd made went through a lot of broken homes, 6 broken homes, 6 foster homes, detention centers, learning disabilities, ADD, dyslexic, in and out of detention centers. And I was in a bad situation, and then I became the Jesse James of my own life, started making careless choices that robbed me. So what I always try to do is to remind students that when I was 17, I want you to know I had an experience changed my life. I found out something's too good to be true, and that is the grace of God and the mercy of God and what Jesus provided. And it not only too good to be true, I found out once you receive it, it is true. And then I found out it's too good to keep to yourself. So I learned if God be for you, who could be against you? And so I'm thrilled to have a tag team partner that I know if the Lord takes me home tomorrow, or if something happens, that this dream will go on and on. But you got to have somebody that gets it, who loves students and goes, you know what? The greatest thing we can do for a student is let them discover for themselves God's custom-made, tailor-made, custom-fitted will for their lives. And, it's not one size fits all, off the rack clearance stuff. God just doesn't throw out it is a personally customized, designed will for you, knowing your background and knowing what you enjoy and what you don't. So to get in on that adventure. So I was at the Air Force Academy speaking. What a great privilege that was. And because of my background, I had spent almost 15 years of my life, all day, every day, going from city to city, speaking in high school and middle schools and detention centers and drug centers about the battle for the mind, battle for the body, battle for your future, and the battle for your family, trying to help students realize that you seal your fate by the choices you make. And then all of a sudden, and I had to speak to thousands and thousands and thousands at a time. I had a hard time with folks that talked about, well, who's your 12 in discipleship? But, sometimes you can be convinced of what you know, but you can still be guilty of what you don't know, making those mistakes. And then I began to realize at the Air Force Academy that some of the best and brightest students in the entire nation, who've been given a lot of opportunities, who had a lot of natural gifts, and a lot of things have gone their way, I began to realize if they're struggling with what it means to be a leader and how to be an officer and a gentleman, and if they're struggling to make some of the basic choices, what's happening to the average teenager? And the thing that I love is I came from this family, no God, no faith, no anything until I was 17, whereas Brent's got incredible testimony, being born in the home of a preacher and parents that loved him and did model it. Now, Brent was a knothead and a knucklehead, as sometimes young people can be. He's the first to admit that. And so Brent had to go through some bumps and bruises, but I never will forget when when I really began to realize, wow, this is something, not just somebody that's a great helper and great attitudes, but this is somebody greatly gifted, called of God. But we had a discussion, and I don't think Brent would mind me sharing it. I just said, Brent, I want you to know I need some help, but I don't just want some exclusive program. And before I could finish, for a bunch of privileged white kids from the Bible Belt, Brent said, man, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because one of the passions of my life is whatever we do, it's got to be for everybody. So we've worked real hard. Yes, we're privileged to get some incredibly sharp and bright kids and kids whose parents are who's who. But a lot of times parents who's who, the kids are going, who's he or who's she, So the thing I loved is from the very, early in our journey together, I realize there's somebody that's going to help me do something I never could do by myself. Remember, if it's of God, you got to have help. And a lot of people, Brent,
right.
be second on this to admit this. We got a lot of people that we rely on who help us and block and tackle for us and believe in us. But we get a great privilege. And I hope parents realize we want to take what all they've invested in their kids, and we want to just pour water on it and some kerosene on it and help it bloom and help it grow. Because there's going to be a day they're away from home, away from the youth group, and maybe Dr. Wine and Cheese walks out and tries to do surgery on their faith, or somebody tries to pull up what your parents or youth pastor or pastors taught at Christian schools poured in. And sometimes it seems some people are determined to pull up everything by the root. And so that's what we're about. So that's how I got the dream. And then fortunately, along the way, there have been one or two very significant people to help us kind of begin to make it a whole lot better.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Jay, it's one of my favorite things about the last, 15 plus years serving at this organization is that there was this original idea that was inspired, and so we're not perfect at it, but we always try to go back to, as the most significant filter by which we process all of our future tense thinking, is this consistent with that original vision and idea? One of my favorite popes in church history, so whether you're Catholic or whether you're Protestant, the Catholic Church, and the word Catholic means universal. So when the Catholic Church started, it was basically they were just saying we're the church, But there was a 4th century pope by the name of Gregory the Great, and I'm summarizing here, so please forgive me. But he said to a bunch of bishops one day that your job and my job is to be a servant to the servants of God. And so, we exist at Student Leadership University we are a parachurch organization, which is an old-fashioned phrase, but we're an organization that's separate from the church, designed to come alongside the church, also Christian schools and families, but we are separate from, designed to come alongside. And so everything that we do, and again, we're not perfect at it, and some days we come up with ideas and we go, we probably should have run that by a few more folks, but one of the things we're trying to constantly challenge ourselves with is what we're doing coming alongside the local church, which really is the hope of the world, as we all know. The local church is God's plan A, and He doesn't have a plan B. And are we coming alongside to strengthen the central mission of the local church? And I think, and I don't want to speak for Jay, but I think one of my greatest challenges and frustrations, and I think probably I've heard him express this as well, is that we have this paradigm for making disciples that doesn't include leadership development. And so we're trying in creative ways and strategic ways to reinforce this notion that cultivating one's influence for the glory of God is not separate from, but rather part of making disciples. And so we got a lot of plans, we got a lot of dreams, we got a lot of stuff we want to accomplish, but it really kind of has to always and forever fit under that central idea, coming alongside the church, and then our role under the big broad umbrella of making disciples is helping those young men and women to cultivate their influence for the glory of God.
Well said, Brent. And one thing I love about servants helping servants, we spend a lot of time, with our youth pastors and youth workers and educators at our youth pastor summits. But one of the main things I love about what Brent said, but one of the main things I think we've noticed is that, discipleship is not just how many are going to be faithful and be there at a particular service. That's important and it's critical, and the scripture tells us we are not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. But discipleship means discipline, and it means to be a learner. But what we came along with is trying to say, praise God for everything you're doing on discipleship, but what good does it do us to have 12 of our church kids on the team whatever team it was, or in the band, or on the cheerleading squad, or at the drama department, or a student officer, a class officer. In other words, whatever you are, whatever team you're on, whatever sport, whatever your, some of the extracurricular activities you do, are you making a difference? And the one word definition of leadership is to influence. So people say, well, we're trying to get followers. We don't need a whole bunch of young people running around thinking they're leaders and in charge. But if you really understand leadership, leaders are willing to do what most folks aren't willing to do. And that comes to service, and I believe the greatest way to earn the right to lead is to serve others. And I look at Brent, and Brent for many years, several different ministry positions, and there were some where he was, in leadership positions, but he served people. He just got the job done. And there's something about that mentality, that attitude. So I think the great joy for us is to watch the light come on in the lives of students and go, you know what, I do want to make a difference, but I got to earn the right to do it. And by the way, it's not about who's the coolest or the loudest. It's about, am I willing to make a difference? Am I willing to help others? Am I willing to serve? And by the way, if you can't lead yourself, right, Brent, you can't lead anybody else. So that's where I think what we get to do along with families is to, all that's being poured into these students, but come along beside that church. I love the way Brent broke that down, and school, but also come along beside those parents. They're our most cherished possessions. So we count it as sort of a sacred trust when we get the opportunity to have students for a week or even longer on some of our programs. So I think what's going on in the home right now is going to really cast the die for what's going to happen in the lives of millions of American students and students around the world. And it's either going to be good or not so good, depending on what's going on inside our homes.
Oh, that's great. Jay, you gave me a great transition statement there, because I do know you guys and do know how much you love the family unit. As you guys know, I'm married to a licensed professional counselor, and she's been talking to me in these days of sheltering in place and the quarantine, of the pressures that are building up in some of these homes, that they've spent more time together in the last 8 to 10 weeks than they've normally spend in maybe even a year. And so as a segue over to that, Brent, I know that your home church asked you to prepare something around the home and prepare some principles that you could share with them around that. And I'd like for both of you to speak to that. But as you were telling me about these 5 principles, I thought, man, that just fits so hand in glove in what we're talking about here today.
Yeah. Well, we do have a massive challenge on our hand. I mean, this shifty, narcissistic virus that is brought the world to a standstill, and it's caused us to look. When it comes to our homes, it's forced us to look inward, which is probably not something we've just to emphasize what you've said is we've done a lot of. We've not done a lot of critical thinking about our homes and how we're facilitating an environment for our children to be not managed, but I want to use the word stewardship here, because I do believe that viewing parenting through the lens of stewardship is an important part of understanding what it means to be a Christ-honoring, gospel-centered, if you will, parent. So with that in mind, I'll throw out 5, I guess you could call them categories, to kind of help process the home and the activities in the home, and then let Jay kind of speak into a couple of those where he'd like to. So I'll throw them out, and then I'll all 5 out, and then Jay, you just kind of after that jump in where you want and emphasize or correct whatever you'd like. But I think there are 5, if you will, kind of emphases that the home should be. Number 1, I think the home should be a place of intentionality. I think the biggest challenge that many of us face is the challenge of this whole pandemic and all this time and how long will it go on and all the uncertainty and all the rest of it, if we're not careful, all that stirs up within us this sense of anxiety, which makes the mountain look a lot bigger than it really is to climb. And so it's amazing how much calm a well thought out plan can bring to a storm. And so I think the home, number one, should be in a place of intentionality where we seek to redeem the time. The more intentional we become with our homes, the better we redeem the time. Just to give you a quick example, for many years, we used our dinner table, as a place to eat meals. And that was pretty much it. Maybe talk about our day, different things. But in recent years, we've really, my wife and I have challenged ourselves to think of our kitchen table as a place to build those relationships and as a place to emphasize the idea of oneness, togetherness, community, and really discipleship. And so we do a lot of our devotional time at the table. We do a lot of our time together as a family where we're processing even our feelings and talking about those. We always come to the table, my wife and I do, with a couple questions each night that we want to wrestle through. So number one, the home should be a place of intentionality where we redeem the time. Number two, the home should be a place of community. The breakdown in the church doesn't start at the church; it starts at the home. And so really understanding that the oneness that Paul writes about in the book of Philippians, to be of right spirit and to be of right accord, to be of right, in other words, attitude and of right purpose, that begins in the home. And so modeling togetherness and oneness, and it doesn't matter whether or not you come from a single parent household or whether you're divorced or whether you're remarried or whether you remarried and you brought kids into the marriage and the others brought kids into the marriage, whatever the situation may be, how can that be redeemed to demonstrate a portrait of togetherness? And so I think the home should be a place of community. Number three, the home should be a place of growth. I mean, how sad would it be if we got to the other end of this pandemic and our growth was stagnated somehow through the process? And so what plan have we put together to help our children renew their minds daily so that the home becomes a place of growth? Number four, the home should be a place of celebration. We love to talk about Good Friday, the Friday before Easter, but really every Friday is Good Friday. In fact, every day is Good Friday, because
that's cool.
This idea of practicing the presence of God, to use a phrase from the Puritan writers, this idea of understanding that his presence and his gospel is sufficient for this moment, that God's enduring presence is God's lasting provision for all of our lives. And then number five, the home should be a place of wonder and magic. And when I say magic, I don't mean some weird, crazy thing. No, just this sense of wonder and imagination and creativity. It should be a home should be a laboratory for creative thought. And if a parent helps their child understand and answer the question, what would I do for the glory of God? I knew that I wouldn't fail. If a parent can help a child storyboard without limitations their future, then that child will spend the rest of their days knowing that my mom, my dad, was my number one fan and believed in me the most out of everybody in my life. So those are five categories that I think really kind of help us to understand and process what maybe the home should strive to be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Jay, I know you've how much family means to you. Share with us based off what Brandon said, share with us your thoughts.
Two thoughts that have leaped to mind. Number one, Brent's a show off, as you could tell by the very good. And number two, how grateful we all are. I got a text from Paul, and he said, "Man, aren't we all grateful that Barry, his wife, is a certified
professional counselor?" Yes.
I want to take a moment to give thanks, and I agree with what Paul said about it. But anyway, I just want to say, first of all, I happen to know Brent quite well, and I happen to know his children quite well. And he and his wife are all those things, very intentional. and it's very community. It's the Crow dogs, the crows. I mean, it really is exciting to see what all goes on in their lives. Now, I'm old school, so I go, especially with looking at what I didn't ever have. But I love the definition of a home is it's a place of affection. It's the one place where everybody's on my side. And that doesn't mean everything they do is applauded. And that doesn't mean there's not discipline. That doesn't mean there's not correction. Obviously, as parents, we've got to do all those things. And it reminds me of the saying of NASA. Parents could make NASA's quote their quote, "We do the hard things." So the hardest thing sometimes, although our children may not realize it, is to discipline our children. Sometimes our hearts are breaking while we do it. But the greatest thing that can happen in a family is affection. I mean, where they're deeply loved, deeply believed in, deeply cared for. And I remember one time we used to teach in our home, my two daughters, that the psychologist says that you need lots of love. And so when they were little girls, little tiny girls, if I don't kiss you right here under your chin, you're going to run wild, join the Hells Angels, and really just go crazy. And so they would, every time they would squeal and run and hide. And I never will forget, I came around the corner and Christina had this Basset Hound puppy named Pharaoh. And she had Pharaoh pinned to the ground and she was going, "Pharaoh, if I don't kiss you, the psychologist says you're going to run with the bad dogs, you're going to knock trash cans." I mean, so that's when I knew, well, hey, at least that saying sunk in. But it's got to be a place of affection. And you spell love, T-I-M-E. I know that's corny, sounds like something that Cracker Barrel's serving for lunch, but I'm telling you, love is spelled by time. And we have some time now, and I pray we don't squander it, let it slip through our fingers. Second of all, the home's got to be a place of protection. And we protect our children. So there's certain programming and channels I never had in my home. And I don't have alcohol in my home. And I never had cigarettes in our home. And there's a lot of other things. I speak to a lot of sports teams through the years. I have a game room filled with sports memorabilia. I love sports. But I even deliberately didn't have a subscription to Sports Illustrated. I know it's going to sound old school, the old guy talking. But I just didn't want those swimsuit editions coming into my home with my two young girls, and they see it sitting there that Dad's looking at this. And I know that's a little thing, but I just think the home's got to be a place of protection. And the greatest way to protect them is our example, and especially how we talk about other people around the table, how we talk about some of the horrible thing, the divisiveness and injustice that goes on, even in the greatest country in the world. We got some things we're just shaking our heads about, saying, "Dear Lord, how could that happen?" So it's got to be a place of affection. It's got to be a place of protection. And then something Brent touched on, it's got to be a place of imitation where we show them how to handle this crisis. Now, this is, for some of us, I've been through 9/11. I went through the Vietnam era. I went through a lot of stuff as a kid. I went through the stock markets crashing where we all lost 50% of everything we owned in one day. I mean, I've been through some things. And so hopefully that's kind of helped me as a parent now, or a grandparent now, right? Be able to model to my kids some of the things about our grandchildren, what we go through. And now, of course, parents are having a right, the opportunity to really prepare their children. I'll close with this, and Brent loves this, I love this. The main goal of SLU, one of them, is to prepare our students for the future. Now, you can't prepare the future for them because none of us control the future. None of us saw this virus coming. But guess what? We have to prepare them for the future, and the future belongs to those that are prepared. And so I think you combine everything Brent said, I said, and Barry, the things that you believe, and thank the Lord again for your wife, who's a counselor. But that we put all that together and bake up this thing called the family. And hopefully it's putting a sweet taste in the mouth of our kids, grandchildren, for the things of God. If God's for us, who can be against us, no matter what we're going through? losing a job or uncertainty or medical conditions. And so these are scary times, and every family's been touched by this virus, and one way or another. So we got to pray for each other, but we got to pull together.
That's incredible. Well, guys, I want to personally thank you for the time you've given today. I know you're extremely busy and summer schedules coming on, and you're doing plan A and plan B.
We're praying. The summer's coming on.
Exactly. Praying that this thing will move on, and we can kind of get back to some normal scheduling and just having experienced what you guys lead out in. I know what the students are in for. So I thank God for both of you. I love you guys. For those of you that are watching right now, you've heard some pretty incredible stuff today. And if you know of a family that's struggling, or perhaps know of parents that are trying to do all they can to love on their teenagers and model it out for them, please tell them about Sharing Hope, and we'll have that up, and you can send a link to them or send them to the website. And guys, I just can't say enough of a big enough thank you today for what you've done for us. And for those of you watching, we will see you next time on Sharing Hope. And God bless you, and hope you have a great rest of your day.